Once you've completed all of your necessary configuration, which includes creating the web apps and setting up the service accounts, as well as going in and creating the connections to G Suite and to OneDrive, you're now ready to actually build your migration plan. To do that, log into Fly, and over on the left, click Migration. In Migration, from the dropdown, select the type of migration you are performing. In this case, we are migrating from Google Drive into Microsoft OneDrive. And then we click OK. This allows you to see if there are any migrations of that type already in place. If you see multiple items selected, well, that just means you have multiple things checked. I can see here that there are no existing Google Drive migrations in place, so I'm going to click Create Plan. First, it wants to know where you are migrating from. It will automatically select what you had picked on the previous screen. Below that, you then have to select the connection itself. Remember, connections are configured in Connection Manager. So this is my G Suite connection. If I have multiple connections, I pick the appropriate one from the dropdown. We click Next. We then have to tell it where we are migrating to. In this case, it is going to be SharePoint. You don't select OneDrive from the dropdown. You will select the OneDrives in the next screen. Also, if you have multiple SharePoint connections, again, select the appropriate one from the dropdown. This is the Microsoft demo tenant I'll be using. And again, we click Next. We now arrive on the most important part of the migration plan itself, which is doing your mappings. The mappings are going to be from your source environment, which again in this case is Google Drive, over to your destinations. Now you'll notice right now as a default, Site Collection is selected up at the top, and I'm not seeing anything. That's because I haven't created any connections to Microsoft SharePoint Site Collections. I've only created connections for this example to Microsoft OneDrives. So if I click on that, we can see them. Now we have to go from source to destination and build our mappings. No mappings are currently configured. You can map top level to top level. You can also drill down by clicking. And you can do that on both sides. So for instance, if I wanted to find one very specific folder and map that over into one specific location in this OneDrive, it's just simply drag and drop. Now, of course, we know that when we copy or move something into Microsoft SharePoint, it wants to do either an attach or a combine. Instead of combine, you may also think of the term merge. With attach, that thing will go under as a sub-object. With combine, it will merge into. So do I want to combine everything from the folder on the left into, including properties, for instance, this top level object over on the right, or do I want to basically just put it inside there? That's the difference between combine and attach. In this case, I'm trying to insert this folder into that location, so I'll leave attach in place and I'll click OK. If I did change it over to combine, that particular folder would essentially take over this object here in SharePoint with all of its properties. We can see one mapping is now configured. To go back up any different levels, you click the arrows up here at the top. If I wanted to map an entire top level object, you could even drill down to a lower level in OneDrive, for instance, and try to drag all of the content from one of your locations in your Google Drive over and drop it. In that case, everything from that source will go into or be merged with that particular lower level folder. So you have a lot of flexibility here, a lot of functionality here. So we have one mapping in place. Let's do a couple more. If I drill down, I can even go all the way down to the individual item level. Here we have a PowerPoint presentation, and I can go over to one of my users. This particular library is where I want to put that. You'll notice in that case, it did not ask me about attach or about combine because we're at the item level. And we'll do one more. This time I'll do a top level from this user's content over completely into a different user in OneDrive. Of course, real world, your source and your names should probably all match, unless you have user content for users that are no longer in the enterprise and you're moving all of their stuff into someone else's. That's fine. Again, attach or combine, we'll do attach. Now, once I have my mappings in place, I can actually review them by clicking right here on mappings. The value here is if you've accidentally dropped something and clicked OK, if you've created an incorrect match, or if you want to, for instance, change between combine and attach. So if I have something I did by accident, I can come in here and I can say, nope, that's wrong, and I can just delete it. I can then close that window, and now we have two mappings in place. Now this is very flexible when you have a few mappings that you want to do, but if you have a large scale number of mappings you want, you may instead want to go to import mode up here at the top. In import mode, you can download a template which allows you to fill out all of your different mappings, source to destinations, and then you can come in here and you can import that file back in, and it will create all of the mappings for you automatically. That is going to be much, much quicker when you are doing large scale types of OneDrive migrations. If my mappings in this case are done for this small migration, I click Next. We then have to give the plan a name. In here we suggest business unit, wave of the migration, and then some type of dedicated plan phase name, but you can realistically use anything you want. Then select your migration policy. Remember, migration policies are created back under migration settings. If you do not want to set your own migration policy, then at the very least you should review the settings within the existing policy just to understand how the migration is going to be carried out. And if you have created your own, you can pick it right there from the dropdown. If you forgot to do the migration policy, you can also click New to create one right now. If you have configured a migration database, you could select it here. Migration databases can also be configured over on the left and store information about each individual migration job, making it easier to review the migrations afterwards. They are not required, however. If you do not wish to configure a schedule, you can either click Finish to save the plan or Save and Run Now. Or, if you do want to run it on a schedule, click Configure a Schedule and choose how often you want it to run. For instance, if I'm doing a migration over time, I may want this to kick off several times over the course of the next few weeks. For that, I can set the original start date and the time. I can tell it how often to run, and I can tell it when to end, either by a date or by a certain number of occurrences. If everything looks good, as I said earlier, I can either click Finish to save the plan and then go back into it later on, either to run it or to edit it, or I can click Save and Run Now if I want to kick off the migration. In this case, I will click Save and Run Now. Since this is the first time the migration is being run, my only choice is full dataset. If you come in here and run it manually at a later time after running the initial full, you will be able to choose incremental as well. I'll click Run Now. That saves my migration plan, and it kicks off the migration job itself. You can view the migration status over on the left-hand side by clicking Migration Status, and that way, once the migration has completed, you can come in here and you can review the results. Thank you for watching this short video on how to perform a GDrive to OneDrive migration using Fly.